"If you can fix this car, I'll give you my company," laughed the CEO, and the princess silenced him. Emily Parker felt her blood boil as she watched the impeccably dressed man humiliate her mother in front of dozens of people. Richard Reynolds, owner of the most luxurious imported car dealership in New York City, gestured arrogantly while pointing at the gray-haired woman trying to maintain her dignity. That's when he said the words that changed everything. He pointed to a dark blue Corvette parked in the center of the garage, its hood open and parts scattered around, and let out a cruel laugh that echoed through the room. "If you can get this car running in 2 hours, I'll hand over my company to you," he said, looking directly at Emily with disdain. "But when you fail, you'll never set foot here again, and your dear mommy will shut down that little backyard garage for good." Emily felt all conversations around them stop. The dealership employees paused what they were doing, some whispering among themselves, others just watching curiously. Her mother, Mrs. Margaret, remained silent, her eyes glistening, clutching the invoice for the service Richard refused to pay. "I accept," Emily replied without hesitation. The words left her lips before she could even think. Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. He expected her to back down, to apologize and leave with her tail between her legs, like so many others he'd humiliated over the years. "Emily, no," whispered Mrs. Margaret, gently pulling her daughter's arm. "Let's just go." But the 25-year-old had already made her decision. She looked at the Corvette, then at the man who had destroyed so many lives with his greed, including her own family's decades ago. He just didn't know yet that she knew the whole truth. 2 hours, she confirmed, walking toward the car. "But when I succeed, I want everyone here to witness the deal." Richard laughed even louder, making a theatrical gesture to the employees around them. "You all hear that, folks? The little princess here thinks she can fix what the best mechanics in the city have already given up on." He looked Emily up and down, noting her designer dress and expensive shoes. "You probably don't even know how to hold a screwdriver properly." Emily ignored the comment and approached the vehicle. She knew that model better than anyone in that room. Her heart raced when she saw the specific modifications to the engine, the distinctive weld marks, the unique details only one person in the world did that way. "Grandpa," she murmured to herself, gently touching one of the parts. "What was that?" Richard asked, stepping closer with a sly smile. "Nothing," she replied, already assessing the problem. "I just want to make it clear that when I succeed, you'll honor your word in front of all these employees." Of course," he waved his hand as if it were the easiest thing in the world. "And when you fail, I want to see you walk out of here humiliated, just like your mother should have done a long time ago." Mrs. Margaret clenched her fists, but Emily signaled for her to stay calm. The time had come to find out exactly who Richard Reynolds was and why he hated their family so much. Emily borrowed a toolbox and got to work. Her hands, which usually held only pens and coffee cups in business meetings, moved with a precision that stunned everyone present. She fully opened the hood and dove into the engine's inner workings. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, continuing. The first problem she identified was too obvious to be a natural flaw. Someone had deliberately swapped some parts, installing incompatible components that would never allow the engine to work. Emily smiled to herself. Richard really thought she was just a spoiled princess. As she worked, she observed the employees around her. Most seemed to silently root for her to succeed. An older man with calloused hands and a worn uniform discreetly approached. "Miss," he whispered, pretending to check other nearby parts. "This model has a specific trick. The ignition system was modified. Look behind the air filter." Emily looked at him gratefully. The man was about 60, with graying hair and kind eyes. His badge identified him as Frank Miller. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "Because I've known your family for a long time," Frank replied, glancing quickly at Richard, who was on the phone across the garage. "And because I know that man has ruined the lives of many good people." Emily followed his tip and found exactly what Frank had mentioned. The ignition system was completely misconfigured, with wires deliberately swapped. She began repositioning each cable to its correct place, remembering the lessons her grandfather had taught her as a child. William Parker had been a race car driver in the 1960s and 1970s, famous for his mechanical innovations that revolutionized American motorsports. Emily grew up listening to her grandfather's stories. He had died when she was just 15. What her family never knew was that during those Saturday afternoons spent at her grandparents' house, William had taught all his mechanical secrets to his most curious granddaughter. "You've got golden hands, girl," the old man used to say. "But your mother will never understand that. To her, a woman should be a doctor, not a mechanic." Emily had obeyed her family's wishes, graduating with a degree in business administration and working in the financial sector. But she never completely abandoned her passion for engines. In secret, she visited her mother's garage on weekends, helping with the more complex cars whenever Mrs. Margaret wasn't around. Now, as she disassembled parts of the Corvette, she allowed herself to remember those special afternoons with her grandfather. William always said a good mechanic doesn't just fix cars, they understand the soul of every machine. And at that moment, Emily felt she was speaking directly to the soul of that Corvette. "How's it going, Princess?" Richard asked, returning from his call. "Figured out you're wasting your time yet?" "Actually, I'm discovering some very interesting things," Emily replied, without looking up from the engine. "This car isn't factory original. Someone made very specific modifications to it." Richard's face paled slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "So what? That changes nothing. The engine's been blown for months." Emily smiled. "Blown engine? Whoever said that knows nothing about mechanics. All the main parts are perfect. Someone just misconfigured them to make it seem like there's an irreversible flaw." The tension in the room grew. Several employees moved closer to watch Emily's work. Richard tried to disperse the group, ordering everyone back to their tasks, but no one seemed willing to miss the show. Frank took advantage of Richard's distraction and whispered to Emily, "This car belonged to your grandfather, William Parker. I was his mechanic in the 70s. Emily stopped working and looked at Frank in disbelief. "You knew my grandfather?" "I did very well. This Corvette was the last car he worked on before the accident. Richard bought it for a pittance when your family had to sell everything." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in Emily's mind. The accident that killed her grandfather had always been a mystery to the family. William was testing a new fuel injection system he had developed himself when he lost control of the car on a turn. He knew by heart. The family never understood how such an experienced driver could make such a basic mistake. "Frank," Emily called, keeping her voice low, "what do you know about my grandfather's accident?" The man glanced around nervously. "I can't talk here. Too dangerous. But I can tell you one thing. That accident wasn't an accident." Before Emily could respond, Richard approached again. "How much longer, Princess? You're already past the halfway mark, and this engine still shows no sign of life." Emily checked her watch. An hour and 15 minutes had indeed passed. Only 45 minutes remained to complete the challenge. She sped up her work, repositioning the last sabotaged parts. That's when she noticed something that made her pause again. Inside the car's glove compartment was a yellowed envelope with William Parker handwritten on it. She discreetly opened it and found documents confirming the vehicle's ownership, along with technical notes about specific engine modifications. The notes were in her grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. He had developed a revolutionary fuel-saving system that increased engine power by 30% while cutting consumption in half. The formulas and diagrams were all there, written with the precision of an engineer and the passion of a true car lover. Emily felt her eyes well up. Those papers represented a lifetime's work. William had dreamed of revolutionizing the American automotive industry, making cars more efficient and environmentally sustainable. But that dream died with him on that fateful afternoon in 1985. "What did you find there?" Richard asked, trying to peek over Emily's shoulder. "Just old documents," she replied, quickly tucking the papers into her pocket. "Nothing important." But it was very important. Those notes held the information she needed, not only to get the engine running, but also to uncover the whole truth about what had happened to her family decades ago. Emily returned to work with renewed energy. Following her grandfather's instructions, she reconfigured the fuel injection system and adjusted the engine timing. Every move was made with surgical precision, as if William were guiding her hands. 15 minutes left, Richard announced, clearly nervous, and this engine is still dead. Rushing is the enemy of perfection, Emily replied, adjusting the last components. Mrs. Margaret approached her daughter, her eyes full of pride and worry. "Sweetheart, you don't have to prove anything to this man." "Yes, I do, Mom. For you, for Grandpa, and for everyone he's hurt over the years." Emily connected the last wires and closed the hood. Only 5 minutes remained. She got into the car, adjusted the seat, and turned the key in the ignition. The entire room fell into absolute silence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now back to the story. Emily turned the key and nothing. The engine didn't even sputter. Richard let out a victorious laugh. "I told you, 2 minutes left, and this car is still a useless piece of junk." But Emily didn't give up. She knew there was something more. She looked back at her grandfather's notes and found a specific remark. "Special security system. Press blue button before ignition." Frantically, she searched for the button until she found it, hidden behind the steering wheel. It was so small and discreet that it would go unnoticed by anyone who didn't know of its existence. Emily pressed the button and tried again. The engine purred with impressive power. The sound was perfect, smooth yet powerful at the same time. The entire garage erupted in applause, except for Richard, who turned pale watching the Corvette running perfectly. "Impossible," he muttered. "That engine was completely ruined." "It wasn't ruined," Emily said, stepping out of the car with a triumphant smile. "It was sabotaged. Someone swapped parts on purpose so it would never work. The question is, who would do such a thing?" Richard tried to keep his composure, but his expression betrayed his desperation. This proves nothing. You got lucky, that's all." "Lucky?" Emily laughed. "Or technical knowledge you underestimated." That's when Frank stepped forward, carrying an old folder. "Richard, I think it's time you told this young lady the truth." "Frank, you have no business here. Get back to work." "I can't stay silent anymore," Frank said, opening the folder. "Emily, you have the right to know what really happened to your grandfather." The folder contained dozens of documents, photographs, and newspaper clippings. Frank spread them out on a nearby workbench for everyone to see. "Your grandfather was developing a revolutionary patent," Frank explained, "an injection system that would change the entire automotive industry. But someone wanted that patent for themselves." Emily examined the documents. There were contracts, purchase proposals, and correspondence between William and several companies interested in his invention. One company that appeared repeatedly was Reynolds Motors, a small dealership owned by Richard's father. "My father tried to buy the patent honestly," Richard said, trying to defend himself. "Your grandfather was the one who refused to negotiate." "Lies," Frank countered. "William wanted to sell the patent to a domestic company to keep jobs in the country. Your father offered a lot of money, but he planned to hand it all over to a foreign multinational." "So what?" Richard said. "Business is business." "Then your father decided if he couldn't have the patent, no one would," Frank continued, pulling a photo from the folder. The photo showed William's Corvette right after the accident. Emily looked closely and noticed something odd. The skid marks didn't match the official version of the accident. "Frank, were you there the day of the accident?" Emily asked. "I was the lead mechanic on your grandfather's team. That day, William was testing the final system for the patent. The car was running perfectly. There's no way it was a mechanical failure." Richard tried to interrupt. "Enough speculation. Emily fixed the car. Congratulations. Now everyone get back to work." "Not so fast," said a woman's voice from the garage entrance. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 50s, wearing a sleek suit and carrying a lawyer's briefcase. Emily recognized her face immediately, despite the years that had passed. "Sarah?" Mrs. Margaret asked, disbelieving. "Hi, Mom," the woman replied, stepping closer. "Hi, Emily." It was Sarah Parker, Emily's older sister, who had moved to Los Angeles 16 years ago after a family fight. The two had never been close. especially after Sarah announced she wanted nothing to do with the provincial life of New York City. "What are you doing here?" Emily asked. "Seeking justice," Sarah replied, staring straight at Richard. "Hello, Richard. Long time no see." Richard's face drained of color. Emily noticed his reaction and began to realize there was much more history between her sister and that man than she'd ever imagined. "Sarah, you have no business being here," said Richard nervously. "This is between me and them." "Actually, I have every reason to be here. I'm a lawyer specializing in labor rights and intellectual property, and I've spent the last 15 years gathering evidence about your criminal practices." Sarah opened her briefcase and began handing out documents to all the employees present. "Did you know Richard owes back wages to over 20 former employees? And that he unlawfully claimed at least 3 patents for inventions that weren't his?" The tension in the garage skyrocketed. The employees started whispering among themselves. Some looked worried, others furious. Emily was still processing her sister's unexpected arrival when Sarah stepped closer and whispered, "I know you got the car working, and I know why. Grandpa taught you too, didn't he?" "How did you?" "Because he taught me first, Emily. Years before you were born. I was his favorite granddaughter until you came along." The revelation hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She'd always believed she was the only one William had taught about mechanics. "Sarah, why did you never tell me?" "Because when you were born, Grandpa fell in love with his youngest granddaughter and pushed me aside. I was jealous, okay? Jealous of a child. Not my proudest moment. But what about Richard? What's the story between you two?" Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "We were engaged. I was supposed to marry him in 1995, 2 years after I graduated from law school. But 3 weeks before the wedding, I found out he was only with me to try and get information about Grandpa's patent." Emily felt like the ground was vanishing beneath her feet. "What do you mean?" "He thought I knew where Grandpa had hidden the original blueprints for the invention. For 2 years, he tried to convince me to search for those documents in our grandparents' house." "And did you know where they were?" "Of course I did. Grandpa showed me everything when I was 15, but I never told Richard. Something told me he didn't have good intentions." Richard tried to step closer to the sisters, but Frank positioned himself between them. "Let the girls talk in peace," the veteran mechanic said. "Sarah," Emily continued, "if you knew all this, why did you never tell our family?" "Because when I found out his true intentions, I was so angry and ashamed that I decided to walk away from everything. I moved to Los Angeles, started a new life, and tried to forget this whole mess existed. But something brought you back today. Frank called me last night. He told me Richard was threatening you. I couldn't let that slide." Emily looked at Frank with renewed gratitude. "You know my sister? I've known your entire family for decades, girl. Your grandfather was my best friend. When he passed, I promised I'd look after you if you ever needed it." "Then why did you never reach out to our family before?" "Because I was afraid of Richard. He fired me 5 years ago when he found out I was investigating your grandfather's accident. He threatened to sue me if I spread lies about him." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now back to the story. Sarah stepped toward Richard, who was struggling to maintain an air of authority despite clearly panicking. "Richard, did you really think you could keep this up forever?" "Sarah, you don't understand. That patent was worth millions. Your grandfather was too stubborn. He wouldn't accept fair offers." "Fair offers?" Emily cut in. "You mean bribes and blackmail?" "No one can prove anything," Richard said, trying to sound confident. "Actually, we can," Sarah replied, pulling a digital recorder from her bag. "This entire conversation is being recorded, and it's not the first time you've confessed your crimes to the wrong people." Richard was in shock. "This is illegal. You can't record me without consent." "Yes, I can, when it's evidence of crimes committed against my family," replied Sarah, showing legal knowledge. "And besides, we have more than recordings." Frank stepped forward again, this time carrying an old shoebox. "Emily, it's time for you to learn the whole truth about your grandfather." He opened the box and revealed dozens of photographs, documents, and even some cassette tapes. William was very careful. He documented everything. Every meeting with businessmen interested in the patent, every threat he received, all the strange incidents that started happening months before the accident. Emily picked up one of the cassette tapes. What's on here? Recordings of the last conversations he had with Richard's father. William suspected someone was trying to sabotage him, so he started recording everything. This won't lead anywhere, said Richard, trying to sound defiant. It's evidence from over 30 years ago. It has no legal value. Maybe the old evidence has no legal value, said Sarah, but the recent evidence does. She signaled to someone outside the garage. A young man walked in carrying a laptop and a professional camera. This is Kevin, my assistant and videographer. He's documenting everything that's happened here today for a lawsuit we're filing against you. What lawsuit? Asked Richard, clearly nervous. Embezzlement, emotional damages, wage theft, and a series of other charges my clients will bring, replied Sarah, gesturing to the employees around them. That's when Emily noticed most of the dealership employees were staring at Richard with expressions of anger and resentment. Wait, said Emily. You all have issues with him. A middle-aged woman who worked at reception stepped forward. He owes me 3 months' salary. Said the company was struggling, but he keeps buying imported cars every week. And my son was fired for asking for a raise after 5 years without one, said another employee. He stole the idea for my mobile garage and patented it under his name, added a third. Emily looked around and realized at least 10 employees were present, all with expressions of people who had a lot to complain about regarding Richard. Sarah, how did you know all this? Because I spent the last 6 months contacting former employees of his company. Richard has a pattern. He hires talented people, exploits them to the limit, steals their ideas, and then fires them with made-up excuses. This is harassment, shouted Richard. You're all ganging up on me. It's not harassment when it's justice, said Frank calmly. You've destroyed the lives of many good people over the years. It's time to face the consequences. Emily felt she was in the middle of something much bigger than she'd imagined. This wasn't just about her proving she could fix a car. It was about decades of injustices finally coming to light. Mom, said Emily, turning to Mrs. Margaret, did you know anything about this? Sweetheart, I suspected something was off about my father's death, but I never had the courage to investigate. It was too fresh, too painful. Why didn't you tell us? Because you were too young, and because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of finding out I could have done something to stop the tragedy? Mrs. Margaret began to cry, and Emily hugged her tenderly. Mom, it wasn't your fault. You were so young when Grandpa died. I was 25, the same age you are now. I should have been braver. You were brave. You opened a garage, raised 2 daughters alone, fought to keep our family together. That takes a lot of courage. Sarah moved closer, and for the first time in years hugged her mother and sister at the same time. Mom, I'm sorry for running away when you needed me the most. Sweetheart, you were hurting too. Everyone deals with pain in their own way. Richard watched the family reconciliation with growing desperation. This is all very touching, but you're forgetting this company is mine. I can call security and have you all thrown out. Actually, you can't, said Kevin, Sarah's assistant, holding up some documents. I did a quick search on the company's financial situation while you were talking. Did you know your dealership has debts that exceed the value of all your assets? That's a lie. It's public record, available on the Internal Revenue Service's website. Your company should have gone bankrupt 2 years ago. The only thing keeping it afloat is unpaid wages and tax evasion. The revelation caused a stir among the employees. Many began whispering among themselves, clearly worried about their jobs. Emily took advantage of the commotion to approach the Corvette again. There was something in her grandfather's notes she still hadn't fully understood. She reread the documents and found an intriguing remark. Secondary system, special compartment behind the dashboard. Curious, she opened the car again and began searching for the mentioned compartment. After a few minutes, she found a small button hidden behind the radio. When she pressed it, a secret panel opened, revealing a sealed envelope. Everyone, Emily called out. I think I found something important. They all gathered as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated October 15, 1985. just 3 days before William's fatal accident. Emily began reading aloud. If someone is reading this letter, it means something has happened to me. In recent weeks, I've received anonymous threats to abandon my patent. Someone doesn't want my invention to reach the American market. I'm hiding this letter here because I know that if anything happens to me, my granddaughter Emily will find it one day. She's the only one who knows all the secrets of this car. Emily paused, her eyes welling up. Her grandfather had predicted she would find this letter. "Keep reading," whispered Mrs. Margaret. "Emily, my dear granddaughter, if you're reading this, it means you've grown into the mechanic I always knew you'd be. The patent for the electronic fuel injection system has been registered in your name since the day you were born. I always wanted you to be the one to revolutionize the American auto industry." Richard turned pale. "This can't be true." Emily continued reading. "All the formulas and technical specifications are stored in a safe at the American National Bank, downtown branch, safe number 1247. The key is hidden in the garage of my daughter Margaret, inside the engine of the first car I ever fixed for her, a blue 1968 Beetle. Emily used this patent to do good, create jobs, protect the environment, and never let greed destroy people's dreams." Mrs. Margaret covered her face with her hands. "The Beetle? Of course. I always wondered why Dad insisted I keep that old car." "Mom, do you still have the Beetle?" "I do. It's in the garage at home, covered with a tarp. I never had the heart to get rid of it." Frank stepped closer to Emily, admiration in his eyes. "Your grandfather was a genius. He foresaw all of this. But how did he know I'd be interested in mechanics?" "Because you showed signs of it even as a little girl. Remember those afternoons you spent in his garage? You were only 3 years old and could already name all the tools." Richard tried one last desperate move. "Even if this patent exists, you don't have the technical know-how to put it into practice. You need a structured company, capital, business connections." "Actually," Sarah interrupted, "my sister has 3 college degrees, including mechanical engineering, which she completed remotely over the last 2 years. Emily looked at her sister in surprise. "How did you know that?" "Because I've always kept up with your life, even from a distance. Mom sent me photos and updates about you through iMessage. I just didn't have the courage to reach out." "So you knew I was studying engineering?" "I did, and I was so proud. You managed to combine Grandpa's practical knowledge with formal academic training. It's exactly what he dreamed of for you." Emily felt an overwhelming emotion fill her chest. For the first time in years, she truly felt connected to her family and her grandfather's legacy. "Richard," she said, staring directly at the man who had tried to humiliate her, "you offered me your company if I could get the car running. The car is running perfectly. That was just a joke. I never meant it seriously." "Kevin," Sarah called, "do you have everything recorded?" "Yes, I do. In high definition with perfect audio. The agreement was made in front of dozens of witnesses." "Then it's settled," Emily said. "You'll honor your word." "Never. I'll sue all of you for extortion." "With what money?" Sarah asked, holding up more documents. "Your accounts are frozen due to debts with the Internal Revenue Service. You don't even have the funds to hire a lawyer." Just then, one of the younger employees from the garage stepped forward. Richard, can I say something?" "What is it, Jason?" "You hired me 2 years ago, promising I'd learn a lot and have opportunities to grow, but all I've done is sweep floors and organize tools. You never taught me anything about real mechanics." "So what? You're paid to work, not to learn." "That's where you're wrong," Emily interrupted. "A good company invests in its employees, teaches them, values them. It doesn't exploit them." Jason looked at Emily with hope. "You really know how to fix cars?" "I do. And if you all want, I can teach everything I learned from my grandfather." Several employees gathered, showing genuine interest. "It would be different working here," the receptionist said. "Having a boss who actually cares about people." Richard realized he was losing control of the situation completely. "You can't do this. This company is rightfully mine." "What right?" Frank asked. "The right to steal, exploit, and humiliate people. I built this business with my own sweat." "That's a lie," Emily said, holding up the evidence found in the car. "You built this business by stealing my grandfather's patent and exploiting honest workers." Sarah stepped closer to Richard with an offer. Richard, I'll give you one chance to walk away without going to jail. You sign over the company to the employees as a cooperative, and we won't press criminal charges against you. A cooperative? You're insane. It's either that or face charges for my grandfather's wrongful death, patent theft, tax evasion, and labor exploitation, Sarah said, counting on her fingers. Your choice. Richard looked around and realized he was completely alone. Every employee stared at him with disapproval, even anger. He had no allies left in the room. You can't prove I killed the old man. Actually, we can, Frank said, opening one of the old files. I kept the original accident investigation report. A report that was never attached to the police investigation. What report? The one that proves the car's brakes were sabotaged. Someone punctured the brake fluid line in a very specific way, so the defect would only show up after a few miles of driving. The revelation left everyone in shock, including Emily and Sarah. Frank, said Emily, why did you never show this to the police? Because I was young, I was scared, and Richard's father threatened me. He said if I spread lies, he'd make sure I never got a job anywhere again. And you believed him? I had a family to support, 2 young daughters. I couldn't risk being unemployed. It was the most cowardly decision of my life, and I've carried this guilt for over 30 years. Richard tried to deny everything. This proves nothing. My father is dead. He can't defend himself. Your father left a diary, said Frank, pulling an old notebook from his bag. He documented everything he did, including the plans to sabotage William's car. Emily took the diary with trembling hands. She couldn't believe she was finally about to uncover the truth about her grandfather's death. Can I read it? Of course. It's your right. Emily opened the diary to the marked page and began reading silently. Her expression gradually changed from curiosity to horror, then to outrage. What does it say? Asked Sarah. It says that Dad planned everything down to the smallest detail. He studied Grandpa's routine, knew exactly which route he took during test drives, and chose the most dangerous curve for the accident to happen. Mrs. Margaret began to cry. My dear father, he was murdered over a patent. Emily hugged her mother, also emotional. Mom, at least now we know the truth. Grandpa didn't die because of his own mistake. He was a victim of cruel people's greed. Richard made one last attempt to defend himself. I didn't know any of this. My father never told me. That's a lie, said Frank. You knew. I saw you at your father's garage many times when we were young. You were always there when he planned things. I can't be held responsible for my father's actions. Yes, you can, interrupted Sarah, because you continued his crimes. You took the patent that legally belongs to my sister and built your fortune on it. Emily looked at everyone present and made a decision. Listen, everyone, I accept the cooperative's proposal. This company will belong to the employees who actually work here and deserve to be valued. The applause was spontaneous and emotional. Several employees came forward to congratulate Emily and thank her for the opportunity. But I have a few conditions, Emily continued. First, no one will be fired without just cause. Second, everyone will receive the back pay Richard owes. Third, we'll create a training program so everyone can learn advanced mechanics. And the fourth condition? Asked Jason. The fourth is that we'll use my grandfather's patent to create more economical and sustainable cars. Profit won't be the company's only goal. Richard watched everything with an expression of utter defeat. You'll go bankrupt in 6 months. You know nothing about running a business. Maybe you're right, said Emily, but at least we'll try to do things honestly and fairly. And you won't be without help, added Sarah. I'll move my office from Los Angeles to New York City to assist you with legal and administrative matters. Emily looked at her sister with gratitude. Sarah, would you really do that? Of course. I've already lost too many years away from family. It's time to make up for lost time. And I can help with the technical side, offered Frank. I can teach everything I've learned in 40 years on the job. Frank, wouldn't you rather retire and rest? Rest? At 62. I still have so much knowledge to pass on. And besides, I need to make up for all those years of silence about William's death. Emily Parker felt like she was living a historic moment. In just a few hours, her life had completely changed. She had uncovered the truth about her grandfather's death, reconciled with her sister, and taken on the responsibility of turning a troubled company into a better place to work. "Richard," she said, turning to the man who now seemed much smaller and more pathetic than he had just hours before. "You have 15 minutes to gather your personal belongings and leave. From now on, you're no longer welcome here." "You'll regret this," Richard muttered as he headed to his office. "No, we won't," Emily replied. "For the first time in a long while, we're doing the right thing." As Richard collected his things, Emily took the opportunity to speak with each employee individually, trying to understand their needs and expectations. She discovered the company had 15 employees, 8 of whom had unpaid wages, and several were considering quitting. "Jason," she called to the young man who had approached her earlier, "how long have you worked here?" "2 years, miss. I started right after high school." "And what would you like to learn?" "Everything. I want to be a real mechanic, not just a handyman. I dream of understanding how engines work, how to diagnose problems, how to make modifications." Emily smiled. The young man's passion reminded her of her own curiosity as a child. "Then let's get started right away. Frank, can you show Jason how the injection system in this Corvette works?" Frank beamed at the chance to teach. "Of course, come here, son. I'll show you technology that's 30 years ahead of its time." While Frank instructed Jason, Emily took the opportunity to speak with her mother and sister. "Mum, how do you feel about all this?" "Sweetheart, I feel proud and relieved at the same time. Proud of you for having the courage to stand up to that man, and relieved to finally know the truth about my father. And about expanding your garage. Would you be willing to work in partnership with us?" "Of course. I've always dreamed of having a bigger shop, where I could serve more customers and offer more specialized services." Emily looked at Sarah. "And you, sis? Are you sure you want to leave your life in Los Angeles to join us here?" "Emily, these past few years, my life in LA was just work. I had no family, few real friends. Here, at least, I'll be helping people I love build something meaningful." "Even knowing it might fail?" "Especially because of that. I'd rather take a risk doing something that matters than succeed at something empty." The 3 women embraced, sealing their pact to work together for the future of their family and the company. Richard emerged from the office, carrying only a small box of personal belongings. He approached Emily for one last attempt. "Emily, you're still young. You don't understand how the world works. If you give me a second chance, I can teach you how to make real money with this company." "Richard, money isn't everything in life. My grandfather was a millionaire in knowledge and generosity, but he died humble because he believed in doing good for people. Doing good doesn't pay the bills. Maybe not, but sleeping with a clear conscience is priceless." Richard shook his head and walked toward the exit. "You'll learn the hard way." "At least we'll learn," Emily replied. "You spent your whole life making the same mistakes. You never learned a thing." After Richard left, the atmosphere in the garage felt lighter, full of hope. The employees began discussing plans to improve customer service, expand their offerings, and create a healthier work environment. Emily seized a quiet moment to start up the Corvette again. The engine ran perfectly, but she knew there was much more potential to unlock with her grandfather's modifications. "Frank," she called out, "do you think we could adapt Grandpa's system to other cars?" "Absolutely. His technology was universal. It could be applied to any internal combustion engine. Then our first goal will be to create a conversion kit that turns older cars into more fuel-efficient and eco-friendly vehicles. That would be revolutionary," said Sarah. "Imagine the positive environmental impact." "And it would be a sustainable business too," added Mrs. Margaret. "There'd be a market for people who want to save on fuel and those who care about the environment." Jason approached the group, his eyes shining with excitement. "Miss Emily, Frank and I were just talking about your grandfather's modifications. It's incredible how he managed to boost power while reducing fuel consumption." That's the magic of engineering, Jason. When you truly understand how something works, you can optimize its performance. And you're going to teach us all this? I'll teach you everything I know, and we'll learn together what I don't yet understand. The receptionist, Amanda, stepped forward with a suggestion. Emily, I was thinking, if we're forming a cooperative, we need to decide how the management will work. Who will make the big decisions? Good question, Amanda. I think we should form a board with representatives from every department. Mechanics, reception, sales, business administration. Everyone should have a say. And will you be the chair of this board? Emily hesitated. The responsibility was immense, and she had no experience in business management. I'll coordinate temporarily, but only until we find someone more experienced. My main goal is to apply my grandfather's technology and teach advanced mechanics. Emily, Sarah interjected, you're underestimating yourself. You have technical training, hands-on knowledge, and today you've shown natural leadership. Why not take on the challenge? Because I'm afraid of letting these people down. They deserve a better leader. Sweetheart, Mrs. Margaret said, your grandfather was also afraid of failing when he started developing his inventions. But he once told me something I'll never forget. The fear of failure only outweighs the will to try when we forget why we started. And why are we starting this? Emily asked. To honor Grandpa's memory, to create fair opportunities for these people, and to prove that ethical, sustainable business is possible. Emily looked around at the 15 faces waiting for her decision, people who had been exploited, undervalued, and now placed their hopes in the possibility of a better future. All right, she finally said, I'll lead this project, but on 2 conditions. First, if I make serious mistakes, you have the right to question me or even replace me. Second, no one here will just be an employee. We'll all be partners in this business. The applause was even louder this time. Emily felt she was making the most important decision of her life. Now we need to handle the practical matters, Sarah said, taking on her role as the lawyer. First, we'll go to the bank to recover the patent documents. Second, we'll formalize everyone's employment status. Third, we'll take a full inventory of the company's assets. And fourth, Emily added, we'll go to my mom's house to get the key Grandpa hid in the beetle. The group organized themselves for the tasks ahead. Frank was responsible for training the newer employees, Amanda was in charge of organizing the administrative paperwork, and Sarah began preparing the legal documents needed to turn the company into a cooperative. Emily, Sarah, and Mrs. Margaret left together toward the family home to retrieve the famous key. The trip was made in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the day's revelations. Mrs. Margaret's house was simple but well kept, located in a quiet residential neighborhood on the south side of New York City. The 1968 Blue Beetle was in the garage, covered by a dusty tarp exactly as she had mentioned. I never had the courage to touch this car, said Mrs. Margaret, carefully removing the tarp. It was too painful to remember, Dad. The Beetle was in surprisingly good condition for its age. The original blue paint still shone in some spots, and the chrome was only slightly rusted. Emily opened the hood and began examining the engine. It didn't take long for her to find a small metal box welded inside the engine, nearly invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. Here it is, she said, showing the box to her mother and sister. Sarah stepped closer with curiosity. How do we open this without damaging it? Grandpa was very careful. If he welded this box, there must be a specific way to open it without ruining what's inside. Emily examined the box more closely and found a small hidden hinge. With the right tool, she managed to open it, revealing a golden key and a note. The note, written in William's familiar handwriting, said, Emily, if you found this key, it means you're ready to take on the family legacy. Use the patent wisely. The future of the American automotive industry is in your hands. Always remember, technology should serve people, not the other way around. With eternal love, your grandfather, William. Emily felt tears streaming down her face. Even after all these years, her grandfather was still guiding and encouraging her steps. Grandpa really thought of everything, said Sarah, also emotional. He was always a visionary, added Mrs. Margaret, even in the smallest details. The three returned to the dealership with the key in hand. The atmosphere was still lively, with employees discussing ideas and Frank teaching mechanical techniques to the younger ones. "Everyone," Emily announced, "tomorrow we'll go to the bank to officially recover my grandfather's patent. From then on, we officially begin our new company." "And what will the company be called?" asked Jason. Emily thought for a moment. "How about William Parker Garage, Technology and Tradition?" "Perfect," said Frank. "It honors the past and points to the future. And our first project will be developing the conversion kit based on Grandpa's technology," Emily added. "Anyone interested in joining the development team can come to me." Half the employees volunteered immediately. The enthusiasm was contagious. Sarah took the moment to make an announcement. "Everyone, I have something important to share. Over the last few months, while investigating Richard's practices, I discovered he owes money to at least 50 different people. Former employees, suppliers, service providers. What does that mean for us?" asked Amanda. "It means we'll have to handle these debts if we want to keep the company running legally." "Sarah," said Emily, "how much money are we talking about?" "Approximately $300,000. The number caused a tense silence in the garage. It was a considerable amount for a company being taken over by employees with no resources. "But I also have good news," Sarah continued. "Grandpa's patent, if applied commercially, could be worth millions. Several automotive companies would pay well for a usage license. So we can use the patent royalties to pay off the debts?" asked Emily. "Exactly, and there'll still be money left to invest in expanding the company." Frank approached with a suggestion. "Emily, why don't we start small? We could open a garage specializing in classic cars, applying your grandfather's modifications. It's a niche market with customers willing to pay well for quality." "Good idea, Frank, and as we grow we can expand into other segments." "And I can handle the promotion," offered Amanda. "I have experience with social media and digital marketing." "Perfect. Let's form teams for each area." The rest of the afternoon was spent organizing the structure of the new company. 5 teams were formed: technical development, customer service, marketing, business administration, and vocational training. Emily was impressed by the amount of talent and skills the employees had. Richard had completely underutilized his team's potential. "Everyone," she said at the end of the day, "I know we're starting a risky adventure. No one can guarantee we'll succeed, but I can promise we'll try to do things the right way." "Emily," said Jason, "even if it fails, at least we'll leave here knowing we tried to build something better. And we'll leave knowing much more about mechanics than we did before," added another employee. "That's true," confirmed Frank. "Knowledge is the only thing no one can take from you." Mrs. Margaret watched everything with pride and emotion. "Emily, your grandfather would be so proud of you today." "Mum, I think he'd be proud of all of us. You for raising 2 strong, independent daughters, Sarah for having the courage to come back and fight for justice, and me for finally finding my true purpose." "What is your true purpose?" asked Sarah. "To use the knowledge I inherited from Grandpa to create opportunities for others. To teach what I know, learn what I don't, and build something that makes a difference in people's lives." As everyone was getting ready to leave, Kevin, Sarah's assistant, approached with his laptop. "Emily, can I show you something interesting?" "Of course. While you were talking, I researched your grandfather's patent online. I found some academic papers mentioning his technology as pioneering in energy efficiency." "Really?" "Yes. Apparently, several universities have studied the principles of his invention over the years. There are even master's theses based on his work." "What does that mean?" "It means your technology isn't just commercially valuable, but also scientifically relevant. You could partner with universities to keep developing it." Emily was excited by the possibility. "That would open doors for research and innovation we hadn't even imagined?" "Exactly. And universities always have students interested in hands-on projects. You could create an internship program benefiting both the company and the students." Sarah smiled at Kevin. "You're very observant. Great idea." "Thanks. I just get excited when I see people fighting for the right ideals." Emily looked around the garage, now empty except for their small group. In just a few hours, that space had transformed from a place of exploitation and humiliation to one of hope and possibility. "Everyone," she said, Let's meet here tomorrow at 8 a.m., first official meeting of William Parker Garage. We'll be here, confirmed Frank. All of us, added Amanda. As they closed up the garage, Emily took one last look at the Corvette that had changed her life. The car was parked in the same spot where the challenge had begun, but now it represented so much more than just a machine. It stood for justice, family, legacy, and the future. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered, "for teaching me that knowledge is power, but wisdom is knowing how to use that power for good." Sarah stepped closer and placed a hand on her sister's shoulder. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Aren't you afraid this might all be too much for us?" Emily thought for a moment before answering. "I'm terrified. But I'm even more afraid of not trying and spending the rest of my life wondering, what if? That's a good life philosophy. It's the philosophy Grandpa taught me. He always said life's biggest regrets aren't the risks we take, but the risks we never had the courage to take." The three women walked out of the garage together, stepping into an uncertain yet possibility-filled future they had created on that extraordinary day. 6 months later, William Parker Garage had become a benchmark in classic car restoration and sustainable technology. The conversion kit Emily developed was being used in hundreds of vehicles, improving fuel efficiency by up to 40%. The company operated as a true cooperative, with all employees sharing in the profits and major decisions. Frank had become the garage's official master technician, teaching advanced skills to a new generation of mechanics. Sarah had permanently moved her office to New York City and was representing small businesses that had suffered from corporate abuse. She specialized in labor and intellectual property law, helping inventors and workers protect their rights. Mrs. Margaret expanded her small shop and now partnered with her daughter's company, focusing on affordable services for everyday cars in the local community. Emily had become a respected figure in the automotive industry, invited to speak at universities and tech expos. But she never forgot her roots and always made time to personally mentor new employees. Jason, the young man eager to learn everything about mechanics, had become Emily's lead assistant and was developing his own research on electric engines adapted with Williams technology. Richard tried suing the Parker family multiple times, but all cases were dismissed for lack of evidence. He eventually went bankrupt and moved to a small town where he found work as a mechanic in a modest shop. Ironically, it was there that he learned the value of honest, humble work. The story of the young woman who silenced the arrogant CEO went viral on social media, inspiring thousands to stand up for their rights and value hands-on knowledge. Emily received hundreds of messages from young women who decided to pursue careers in engineering and mechanics after hearing her story. But of all the changes, the most important was the reconciliation of the Parker family. The 3 generations of women, Emily, Sarah, and Mrs. Margaret, were finally working together, honoring William's legacy and building a better future for everyone. One Saturday afternoon, as Emily taught a group of teenagers about engines in the garage, she found a note her grandfather had hidden inside one of the old tools. "Emily, my dear granddaughter, if you're reading this, it means my greatest invention worked perfectly. I'm not talking about the engine patent. I mean the lessons I tried to teach you about values, perseverance, and generosity. You've become the person I always dreamed you would be, someone who uses knowledge to build, not to destroy. Keep making a difference in people's lives. The world needs more people like you, with eternal love and endless pride, William Parker." Emily smiled, tucked the note into her pocket, and went back to teaching the young ones. She had found her place in the world, not just as a talented mechanic or a successful businesswoman, but as someone who turned knowledge into opportunities and opportunities into hope. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of perseverance and justice. Do you believe Emily made the right choices by turning the company into a cooperative? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know if you've heard of similar stories of people fighting for their rights. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.